Hello everyone, I'm Divya. I hope you all have been gaining insights from the various sessions we have had so far. In this session, Transforming Clinical Trials with AI, we'll discuss how AI is reshaping the way clinical trials are conducted, from speeding of patient recruitment, improving protocol design, or making sense of complex data sets more efficiently. So, Julie, before I hand it over to you, I'll quickly introduce all the panelists and yourself as well. I'm pleased to welcome our moderator for the session, Julie Krommenhoek. She is the Chief Growth Officer at RWEsearch Health and a seasoned executive with over 25 years of experience in life science sector. Julie has led global sales strategy, clinical commercial solutions across leading organizations, including IBM Watson Health, Etion, Ciox Health. She brings deep expertise in business growth, product launches, and innovative partnerships with a proven track record of building high-performing teams and scaling startup. Julie combines her dual background in medicine and business to drive transformation and deliver value across pharmaceutical and healthcare ecosystem. Next, I'd like to introduce Toy Astorino, a co-founder and CTO of PicnicHealth. He founded the company with the mission of getting better treatments to patients, and today leads the development of foundational AI-driven software and data infrastructure to enable faster and more efficient, reliable clinical research. Troy previously worked at SpaceX, Lockheed Martin, and MIT CC. He combines deep clinical expertise with a passion for patient-centered data, building structured medical records that accelerate research and improve health outcomes. We have David Hall, Managing Director of AKT Health and Chief Investment Officer at AKT Capital. David brings expertise in deploying AI-powered clinical and medical and commercial decision support platforms, including Impact Clinical, Impact Pulse, and remote patient monitoring systems. In his role, he has led global initiatives across 18 countries, supporting over 1,100 plus pharma partners in harnessing real-world evidence to advance patient care. At this session, David will share how large language models, agentic AI, and real-time analytics are transforming data collection, patient identification, and study optimization. I'm pleased to welcome Madhav Vattikuti, SPVP Technology and GM India at Perceptive. With over 25 years of experience in software product management and clinical research, Madhav leads global innovation in AI-enabled platforms, decentralized trials, real-world data solutions. Prior to Perceptive, he held senior leadership roles at IQVIA, Clario, Merge Healthcare, where he has driven informative transformation digital solutions across healthcare and life sciences. His expertise spans software architecture, product innovation, large-scale global operations, and shaping healthcare evidence generation platforms. Dan Housman, co-founder and CTO of Graticule, co-founder of Courage Therapeutics, and as a dedicated patient advocate for anorexia nervosa. Dan is a seasoned entrepreneur with a unique blend of expertise in technology, biochemistry, life sciences, building companies that create innovative solutions to understand healthcare challenges. At Graticule, he leads the development of digital accelerators to advance real-world data, while at Courage Therapeutics, he's advancing new medical treatments for eating disorders. With a career spanning Converge Health by Deloitte, Partners Healthcare, and multiple tech ventures, Dan combines technical leadership, product strategy, and patient-centered innovation. Personally, I have had the privilege of working closely with Dan over the last few years, and I have first-hand experience of how his vision and guidance have shaped Graticule's work in leveraging real-world data to bring impact. His deep expertise in trial automation and data strategy continues to push the boundary of how technology can transform clinical research and accelerate better outcomes. So, over to you, Julie, to take it from here. Welcome, everyone.
Great job getting through that. That is a lot of
Real quick.
expertise. I hope we don't feel too old after all that, but here we are. And thank you so much. Again, Julie Krommenhoek. I had the pleasure of joining Prab this morning for the welcoming, and I'll kick it right off with actually one of the topics that was discussed in the opening comments, opening remarks. And today we're going to cover three different areas within the AI and real world data, starting with the current state. We're going to then move in. So in the current state, we're going to talk about the biases that exist. The second part will be about AI and time and breaking that barrier in ways that are kind of interesting to everyone on the panel. And each of them will be adding their expertise into that. And then lastly, we'll close with on the future, hype versus reality, and give our kind of forecasting and talk a little bit about that. But we're going to start right off with one topic that we did get a lot of feedback already about the current state of the suggested global statistics that we weave in, which is the concerns about the data and the bias among healthcare leaders. This morning, I mentioned that 60%, it's actually a little higher, of global healthcare leaders admit that they worry that AI may be biased. We pressed further and said, what are you saying when you say bias? And what they're referring to is we just feel like some of the information that we're using today in AI is basically recycling some information that we maybe don't want to have recycled. So the key is to break that bias. And I want to kind of jump around the room, first of all, and we're going to talk about how you as a leader have, whether you're whatever piece of the business that you're covering, why do you feel that maybe that potential data bias exists in AI? And what do you think we should do to kind of shape that? Or what are your thoughts on that? I'm going to lead out with Troy, if you don't mind, if you want to lead us out with just any concerns you have on the bias as we talk about AI and RWE.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I think high level, I would start with just acknowledging that with any mechanism of like collecting data or gathering evidence, there are forms of bias, right? It's like when we're conducting clinical trials, there's bias in terms of what participants can go to trial sites to like have like the opportunity, have the geographic like availability to be able to participate in trials. And so yes, there is certainly bias that exists, but our job as researchers and scientists is to be able to characterize that bias and adjust for it and make sure that we are not drawing inappropriate conclusions based on that. So that's to say that I wouldn't look at bias existing as inherently a problem, but the question is like what degree of bias and what level of bias. The type that I think we think about the most is in the patient populations that we recruit, and we operate in the US only today, but try to ensure that we can go to participants in their home, wherever they are, to be able to reach a broader population than might be typically in like a traditional trial. But yeah, I'd say that's my high level perspective, is that like, yes, bias exists. And the question is really not, is there bias, but is the bias worse for the research question than the alternatives that you'd be considering?
The alternatives. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Troy. Madhav, you're next on deck. What are your thoughts on the bias that exists? And by the way, it's totally fine in this panel to disagree and say, you know what, I'm an outlier. I'm not in that 60%. I don't believe there's a ton of bias. So feel free to take any edge you want.
No, I will agree with Troy. And I think Troy is right about the bias, because bias is based on everything that we've seen so far. And we may not have seen so far. And I'm based out of India, for example. And the amount of data collected during clinical
I believe you're on mute.
So, can you hear me? No?
Yeah, I was hearing you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, I hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm not hearing. Okay, now I can hear.
So I think as we talk about bias in the Indian context, for example, there's not a lot of data, and there's obviously the practices of conducting clinical trials is something that is coming up more and more, especially multi-region clinical trials. That gives us the opportunity to look at the data that we have, especially the real-world evidence that is driving the data. It's important to look at it holistically, because you want to train engines and all the data that you have that I think normalizes some of the peculiar characteristics that you may have from a regionality perspective. So I think combining the attributes of data when it comes to taking that data as a total aggregate of everything that we know about something, and then also making sure that we layer in some of the things related to the regionality of that data, because we all know that's why we conduct multi-region clinical trials. In that regionality, respecting that regionality and studying that, I think will be a good key to ensuring that it's not overtly biased in terms of how we leverage AI and data in our conduct.
I like that. Well said. Dan, do you want to add on to that?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of a ludicrous assertion that AI is biased. And I mean it only in that intelligence is biased. So artificial intelligence will be biased. Meaning whatever we've learned to date is forming the opinions of all of the decisions and processing of all the data we receive as humans. So if a doctor is going to go and make a decision, they're biased by all the medical literature they've read, all the patients they've seen. That's their bias. So of course we have bias when we look at AI. And it should just be the same way we look at bias in humans, that new information may not yet have been integrated yet. It takes whatever. It used to be a statement. It took 13 to 17 years to integrate new evidence into practice. So if we're biased in AI, we shouldn't be surprised, but maybe we can cut some of that time using AI to integrate the data faster and integrate that information to the person, because it's not like we're treating a patient because some AI burps out, give this patient this drug. There's still a doctor in the middle here. And from a policy perspective, there's still organizations that are thinking through, but it gives a lot of big benefits. Now, in the context of what we're talking about here, which is clinical trials are all about reducing bias. Right? That's what we're doing. We want cases and controls that are as matched as possible. We want to be able to have a big enough population with a low enough cost. So everything we're doing to use AI to make these things work is to reduce bias. So I don't think in the scenario of clinical trials we're dealing with that problem as much, because the decisions we're making in a clinical trial are mostly, does this patient have this disease or not? And trying to get that.
Yep. No, I like where you went with that. That's a fun test to whether or not the bias is really a logical problem that we're having, or if it's just something that literally we're all just fearing it, rather than talking about what's going into the AI. David, do you want to capitalize on why bias tends to be, the leading strike zone for why AI is not being adopted? Or is it just kind of a catch-all? Is there any part of the bias that you actually agree with or disagree?
Yeah, I echo Dan's sentiment that we're holding a mirror to ourselves, as they say, to define what ethics, morals mean to us, what bias means to us. I don't think that is really the barrier to adoption. We work with a number of foundations, nonprofits, patient advocacy groups, such as one example, the Beautiful Way Foundation, who is promoting diversity and health access in underserved populations around the U.S. and around the world. And we're working with them together with our AI programmers to ensure that the bias, is not included. So the technology is only a tool. We need to work with patient advocacy groups and other groups like this, and then ensure that our algorithms do not have that bias. We have the human in the loop, human expert in the loop, to ensure that it is minimized as much as possible.
I like that take on it. So we've kind of seen a full scope of how it goes. One thing that struck me there, Dave, is when you said the time factor. So one area that I hear often when we talk about AI and time, and I mean time to market. So in other words, to get through an entire life cycle of a molecule, how will AI and time break the barrier of moving faster? When I think of time, just so you know, I'm thinking of it in kind of four scopes. Do you trust that the time is going to be done well? Is it the integrity of the time, the quality that is spent? Also the mindset and the efficiency. So that's how I spell time when we're talking about time to market: trust, integrity, mindset, and efficiency. So as we think about those four types of ways of thinking about how time and AI come together, I wanted to see, I'll start back with you again, David, and then we'll work around the other way. If you can kind of comment on what time means in the AI equation. So faster to market, what are some of the barriers? What are some of the thoughts right in your business that you can use as an example where time is improved by AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it took us the entire last year to assemble a Delphi panel of pharma leaders. We had a monthly pharma leaders event series here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the Kendall, MIT area. And we addressed these questions. So we wanted pharma leaders sharing their real life experiences, real world applications. Where are they applying these technologies? And what's the goal, whether on the healthcare system side? How is AI improving, patient care delivery and outcomes on the clinical trial side, on the pharma side, biotech side? how is this saving us time? Why do we want to add this technology? Not just a nice to have, but a must have. What's the either ROI, or I like to say ROE, return on engagement, with these technologies? Is it we've been able to us personally at AKT Health, we've been able to reduce patient recruitment times with AI ML and our agentic AI from months to weeks. We've been able to increase the amount of number of patients from dozens to hundreds. This saves a tremendous amount of time, and as we all know, every day delayed in a clinical trial is around $800,000. So time is very, very important when you're running clinical trials. It cannot afford to be delayed, and AI is proven now to help us reduce that time.
Love it. Great answer. All right, Troy, I'll move over to you. What is the time factor for you at PicnicHealth? What does AI do to, how is it instrumental in the work that you're doing today?
I think there's a few ways to look at this as you're describing with different aspects to time. And I often think about the calendar time, like you're talking about, what are ways to speed time to market? For us, it's like, how can we run studies, run trials faster? That's like speeding recruitment time, speeding startup time. And then, as David was mentioning, then there's also making more efficient. So making processes more efficient. So when there's some task you have to do, like some drafting, some research, how can you leverage AI to be faster in that work than you individually would be otherwise? So I think those are both clear ways that AI can step in an assistive manner in places in the process today to get information in faster. I think that the trust piece that you mentioned is also important. There are processes that there are a lot of ways that AI can improve accuracy and improve quality of data from the status quo. I think in particular, looking at finding and abstracting information in medical records or charts, you have traditional models of chart abstraction where someone could be trying to get a bunch of charts in and going through dozens, hundreds of pages of records. And people are people, you're going to miss stuff. When you can leverage AI to highlight and find relevant pieces of information so that you're, as a human who's operating your focus, is in the places that are of highest relevance, highest significance, you're going to be less likely to miss things. And so see AI as helping, speed calendar time, speed efficiency, but then also increase quality in appropriate places.
So you would say, Troy, too, and then I'll let you go here. What you're also seeing it as some of the tasks that can be done that are very manual that can be done through the AI process is really speeding up. So you're an advocate in that area where you're seeing it as a massive benefit to
huge. And it's to be a benefit in both time spent and in quality of output.
Quality, because you're checking it.
Yeah.
So, Madhav, I'll run to you. I see you nodding, and then Dan.
Yeah.
So start with you, Madhav. Again, if you were to pick, between the trust, integrity, mindset, and efficiencies from what Troy just said, where do you believe you have to pull on? Which of the strings do you have to pull on the quickest to say, how do we change and become more advocates for the AI?
No, I think I'll just continue on what Troy started, right? I think all aspects of time, as you mentioned, trust, integrity, mindset, efficiency, they're all components of what we deal with daily in the conduct of clinical trials and the execution of clinical trials. And to me, I'll take a real life example of something we've done. Today, there's talk about the digitized protocol where someone says, hey, you know what, I can take the protocol and everything's going to be magically done after that. I think it'll take time for us to get to the point where we trust that process that has done that, right? But if you take a very simple example of, say, we have a process, a sub-process, and a task even, where someone's taking a requirements document and someone's creating users and roles in a system that already exists, then we can establish trust within the automation of that process through AI, which reads the document, processes for the roles that are in that document, is able to configure that element of that system. That then lets us trust the aspect of creating roles within those applications for that particular purpose. And I think that's definitely an efficiency play and a quality impact, because as the machine's doing it, that task, you get definitely payback in terms of efficiency and quality. But it's also a mindset shift, because as you layer that task within the rest of your workflow, how is that going to give you the efficiency? But also, how are you going to use that in our regulated space from a validation perspective, from a making sure that everything that we deliver is checked twice, documented, etc. How do you build that integrity into the whole process? So to me, all of this will continue to happen, but I think it's important for us to take these as chains of tasks, or a chain of tasks, basically, that we continue to automate until we get to the utopian world, which is really take a protocol and you get your study ready to deploy and recruit patients. And I think we're far away from that, but there's no reason to think that we cannot automate and deliver on tasks that today take us time and have issues when we are doing it.
Those are great examples. I like that. Dan, do you have any real world examples that you can think of where you could take the mindset, or where we've seen in real life? Do you have an example that you can think of that maybe might cite why AI and using it in real life as a fit for purpose is really something that we should embrace and not steer away from?
Well, first of all, I'd like to echo everybody's comments already. We can bring down the cycle time on trials, and it's really hard.
Yep.
And it's really hard because it's hard to set up sites. You set up the wrong sites. A lot of them recruit 0 patients, right, of the entire thing. And that costs millions of dollars. It's super inefficient. So just having the intelligence up front to know that it's likely something's going to happen based on historical data lets you pick the right sites. And then having the sites that are picked be efficient and started up effectively. We're still living in a world of EDC. I can tell you on one hand the number of successful pilots people have run getting rid of EDC. Yet this is a ridiculous framework for collecting data. We enter all the data in the medical record, and then someone else gets a whole other form. They figure out how to put it into that form. That form is created because it's somehow compliant with what we think is the FDA's impression of validation. We have 100,000 fields in the EMR, and we have 50 fields in the EDC as an example. So if we in a whole new approach, the first thing we can do is let's get rid of this person in the middle whose job should be defunct. We don't have wire operators operating our phones anymore, plugging these little things in. This person's basically doing that job. Right? That's what an abstractor of an EMR does. They do an outdated task of cutting and pasting things, and we're expecting their intelligence to be necessary in between. So whether it's AI or it's some combination of AI plus logic, we can just wipe out a whole lot of work. And if we do, we just completely break the paradigm of how we're executing the study. Now, there's a lot of problems we open up. Every back-end system is designed to operate against the current model. But we can suddenly have the data that would be helpful to be agile. So when we were working with a customer of ours at J&J, their big benefits, a lot of them came down to agility. Protocol changes. They don't have to change the data collection forms, retrain everybody, figure out everything that has to happen, because they have the source data and they can immediately transition it into the systems downstream using some combination of machine intelligence and programmatic activities. And I think that one piece we got to look at is how can we pull these people out of the loop
and get them moving in that direction.
Because that's going to benefit the patients, going to benefit the regulators, going to benefit the success of those studies, because we're going to see subgroups that are going to benefit. So I think we're missing some of the big picture wins, because time is great, but time in a really automated horse is going to run at the same speed, right? You're not going to, like, no matter how we build the automated horse, it's going to run up to 22 miles an hour. Right?
That's where mind shift.
It's not going to be a rocket ship. It's not. It's going to run at that speed. So I think we're trying to get to, I think, with AI is, can we get all of the friction out of the system so that we can run at rocket speed with the trial and get to what I think an outcome from a sponsors looking for would be, I now understand the population, which I understand the sub-indications, I understand the safety signals, I have a product that the FDA is really confident in, and when I market it, people are going to want to use it because there's a lot known about this product and how well it works.
Yep. I like it. Great answers. Okay, this one I'm just going to have randomly join in as quickly as you want. The question is, now that we are moving from futuristic, so we know that at the state, from all the things that we've been mentioning, is talking about the time, the speed, and the trust of the fact that as long as we're putting good data into the system, we have to trust that the data coming out of it is going to pair well with helping the human side of this business. Now, what part of we're calling it hype versus reality? If we were going to talk about reality, what are some areas specifically in your business or your thoughts that you believe in the next year or two, not light years away, but in the next 2 years that you feel will be affected at the greatest level of trial life cycle? So design, recruitment, monitoring, data analysis, reporting. Pick whichever one, but just give me an example of which one you think is ripest for transformation, and then a quick answer of maybe a minute or less on why you believe that transformation is going to come the fastest. Feel free to jump in, whoever wants to tackle that one.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in on this.
All right, thanks, David.
With clinical trials, we haven't seen fully decentralized clinical trials yet. Mostly it's been hybrid, DCTs. So where you are collecting data or doing some type of monitoring in a location other than your main site or one of your main locations. So I think, we will definitely see more and more of that, especially considering the 6 Ds of exponential thinking. If you're familiar with Singularity University, so we are having dematerialization, demonetization, so the devices becoming smaller and smaller, less and less expensive. We're working in areas where that's very important, underserved areas around the world. We work in the Middle East, we work in Africa, we work in Europe, Latin America. Say, for instance, in Nigeria, where we're working to implement decentralized clinical trials. There, the market, it's the third largest economy in Africa, third largest population, over 200 million people. That breaks down to only about $15 per person when you look at the projected growth rates, about $800 million to $1.5 billion in digital health technologies over the next few years, where, that breaks down, as I mentioned, to about $15 per person. Everyone has an iPhone in Nigeria, for instance. So they have access to these devices. They have access to mobile applications. So I think we are going to see more and more DCTs. Somebody will come in. It's very difficult for big pharma. The window of opportunity is kind of closing to be able to scale decentralized clinical trials. So they're adding maybe one device. Let's measure this one thing, whether it's ECG patch, oximetry, glucose monitor, and that changes the IT governance. It changes their SOP. So it's a bit difficult, but I think we will see disruption. Part of that 6 Ds. We'll see a smaller company come in. It'll be completely 100% decentralized, while the big pharma's still trying to figure out where to apply these technologies.
Got it. I like, Madhav, was that you? Who else wanted to chime in on the hype versus reality area of what area you believe in the next couple of years.
I think,
go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Julie. And yeah, just continuing on with that thread, which David mentioned, Dan mentioned, right? I think if we go back to the origin of AI, it's not like this was invented 2 years ago, as much as we would like to think this is when ChatGPT came along, right? It's something that has existed for some time, machine learning and so on. What has happened is that as we continue the journey, I do believe that the rate of change is going to increase. And this is just everything works that way. And what is going to happen, I believe, is that as we conclude our experiments, as we incorporate the changes into our current processes, as we continue to put the framework of governance that David mentioned, as we continue to do all of those things, the speed at which we will be able to accomplish that will also increase. And I think we'll come to an inflection point, I believe, where Dan is right. The electric horse is only going to go 22 miles an hour, right? But the thing is, when do we break the electric horse? Because that's the only thing we know. And I think for us to develop that intuition about this is now the way to redesign trials. This is how you can decentralize, to what David said. This is how you can actually reimagine the capture of data so that you're not breaking the regulatory boundaries that we all have to obey. I think that change will continue to happen, but the rate of that change will start to increase because AI is now, over time, something that hasn't happened, or that wasn't true, I would say 3 years ago, is now AI has become more of a commodity. So it's not AI itself that's cool, but what you do with it, which is really something that people are focused on. And there are layers and layers that people are building with their technology stack in terms of how AI is solving even more problems, but not just solving them, they're abstracting it even more. And I think that rate of change will start to get us to a place where I don't think we will divorce the process, the controls, the governance, because at the end of the day, it's about human lives that we're really thinking of on a day in, day out basis. It's really about how we still maintain that framework of control while adopting these new techniques and technologies to redefine incrementally, but at a higher rate of what we do.
I like that, higher rate. And then I caught on something you said about sometimes you have to look at it in a way that you have to break it first. Mm-hmm. So between Dan and Troy, what are the things, Dan, that you see that we will have to break because it really wasn't done that well or appropriately anyway for AI to actually grab on? So Dan, I'll give that to you first.
Sure. But I'll start by mentioning the last question, which was what's going to happen first.
First, yeah.
What's going to happen first is, from a quote, like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That the challenge is clinical trials are things where a lot of groups are partnering, including the FDA or including the EMA. And so it's hard to move any part without the whole thing getting slowed down by consensus issues. So the places that are the fastest are the places where folks can go alone. So go alone.
There we go. So you're kind of leading directly into my question.
Right. So go alone would be there. So the go alone are things like, I'm going to select sites from a big pile of real world data. So I got dragged into clinical trials. I'm an EHR real world data person. What the hell am I doing here? There's no real world data in clinical trial. And we're being dragged in from the real world data space because those are the places that can move faster. Those are the places where we can already pull in a big pile of data that's already there and do something with it. And so where those exist, it's going to go fast. So it's going to go fast in a place like, I want to do ECAs and pull in a bunch of data and quickly get the data out of the ECA, whereas in the past we did abstraction. To Troy's point, now we can take that abstraction and sort of shrink that to a really tiny space. So ECA is a great application because you can kind of go alone because you're already getting the data. Similarly, you're going to see good applications in compliance functions because those are things the pharma is doing by themselves anyways, right? Things like source data verification. Can we automate source data verification so there aren't people making phone calls all day? That's going to happen, right? We just had the data. We have the source data. The source data verification problem goes away. And that's like a quarter of the spend on the study.
on the study itself. Yep.
So that's the first half of the answer is it's
Okay.
going to be the easy stuff. The hard stuff, when you're asking what has to move to break the cycle, there is zero highway for interconnectivity to make this AI work for the things we're talking about. So we're talking about, we're going to recruit patients really fast. You know, we recruit patients, we go and send a protocol to a health system and they go figure out who the patients are. Right? We're going to have to figure out a way that we can move algorithms back and forth that are trained to find the right patient. And on top of that, move algorithms that are going to support workflow. Because just finding a patient has nothing to do with recruiting a patient. Right? That's like the easiest half. It's actually figure out who's the right person, what's the process. All that needs to be broken down for, you know,
or refed into the machine.
Yeah. And for the big barrier, it's going to be building networks, meaning like interconnectivity, interoperability. It has to happen. It's a prerequisite for applying AI at scale. It doesn't exist, and it's really hard because it requires trust between folks that don't know how to trust each other easily. Right. And what I mean is for our space, when we're doing EHR to EDC, broadly speaking, which I still think should just be EHR into a trial. The first step is going to be connect a health system to a pharma and suck in only the patients that are part of the study. That needs to happen. And that needs to be regular infrastructure. And we're 7 years away from that.
7. You're noting 7. Okay.
7 years away from that.
7 years away.
And I'm being optimistic.
Troy, do you believe in the 7 years, or where are you at on the scale of how far are we from breaking some of the things that will actually speed up that pattern and get us into a faster turn cycle of getting trials to market?
I mean, maybe first on 7 years of interoperability, and then some other thoughts. But I think like there are systems by which like information is passed around today. Some of them that are horribly inefficient and like, you know, something like very direct, like in the way that we operate for like getting EHR data. There are systems from which we can like get data directly and electronically, but there's places we can't. Like even within a given health system, there like EHR might be set up in a way that like some of the modules aren't fully integrated and like don't participate in health exchanges and things like that. But it doesn't mean that you can't access data. You can still do horribly inefficient things like faxing out requests and getting information like faxed or mailed back to you, and which we find to like get data that is relevant for research is like often is necessary for maybe like half of research variables that we're capturing, and you can still use AI to make that far more efficient than it would be otherwise. So while I definitely agree with Dan that you know, a full world where like data is where we have like infrastructure, systems, permissions, et cetera, set up that data flows seamlessly between like EHRs at different health systems into like pharmaceutical companies when like patients provide consent. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be 5+ years away for sure, at least. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can do today to make things.
You already
work
mentioned
better.
Abstraction, adjudication. I mean, there's enough, you know, more repetitive type of business that can be done to really put the scientists in a position where they can actually use the AI as their way to take off the way that you're saying. So
yeah, I think one thing that's worth keeping in mind, like helpful framework here, is that like today AI operates well. Okay, I think we've had capabilities from AI like growing in a like crazy fast way. Like machine learning AI has been around for many years, but it is a recent phenomenon that like with large language models that we have computers that can interact with natural language and can like understand written text, can generate written text. And even if all advance stopped today, if there was like no more development and capabilities from models, we'd have like a decades worth of work to just like take the capabilities that exist today and transform all of the different like processes that work first incrementally and then more aggressively over time with what we have. But the wild thing is, even with that, like, capabilities aren't stagnant. They're continuing to like increase at an exponential pace in a predictable way. And so like it's a race, and you gotta go like as fast as you can to like be able to transform things based on what is newly possible that was never possible before, and looking at like what you can continue to change. And so it's a like reality versus hype question. There's huge.
It's a little both, right? The hype is the fact that Dan says it's 7 years and plus to do some pretty major changes where it's automated completely, but also the hype is there because you're saying stop where we're at right now and we can still see, light years into what we were doing before just by using the AI capabilities. And David, I really liked, I'm going to go back to your point on the equity side of this. How do you see, before we wrap up here, because really the real challenge that we're helping solve, first of all, you're all, whether you know it or not, advocating just by speaking about how becoming better or looking for better data and having that data be on the right track with AI is making AI more trustworthy. And to be leaders saying, hey, let's try it. This is part of our new job, is to see how we can take and bridge between the machine and the human, and definitely not taking the human out of this. So I know that you talked about the equities part of this. And I know that a lot of your work is deeply vetted in the human-centered side of this. What would you say is probably one of your leading realities that you see from AI that you've been shocked by, something that you're really advocating for?
Yeah, I'd say definitely, the farmer leaders want to see the bottom line. So the human aspect, the equity aspect, they're all nice. They say, okay, that's nice to have. It's good PR, things like that. What's going to get their attention is doing the pilots, showing the quick wins, following the change management, which is what we kind of bake in to what we're doing. And then we're going to bring in those influencers, bring in the advocates, bring in the executive champions. They're going to see, the return on investment or the return on engagement. See exactly why do I want to be more diverse? Why do I want to be more equitable? How does that affect my bottom line? And we're going to see more and more with, precision medicine, individualized medicine, personalized medicine, where we're bringing in not only EHR, EMR, we're bringing in omics, right? Genomics, proteomics. And I think that when leaders and the executive champion see how this affects the bottom line by having more diverse populations in the clinical trials, how it helps to develop, new targeted drugs. And, we're breaking down those silos. We're working across, and, it's the first time ever we've had the leaders from R&D, from medical affairs, all in the same room, clinical and even commercial, right? Because we've seen where the breakdown of those silos with AI and in the data analytics and the insights that we're able to gain from clinical and even commercial goes into developing now new novel drugs, and it just can't not be done otherwise, and companies need that competitive edge. But pharma leaders want to see exactly how does this impact the bottom line. If I'm going to be measuring something, what's the purpose? If I'm going to be more diverse, more equitable, why do I need to do that? No one ever really thought about this, right? Before, it's like, okay, you need people in clinical trials. What's the purpose of being more diverse in clinical trials? And they will see that, and they are beginning to see that, and how it's going to go into developing new novel drugs, how in precision medicine, and that's going to affect the bottom line because they're looking for ways to overcome the patent cliffs that are coming that may account for some projections up to half of all revenue. So it's pretty serious. Everyone's trying to figure out, should I create a COE, an innovation center? Should I go on a buying spree, out licensing? Should I, how can I innovate? And everyone's kind of trying to figure this out, where to apply the technology and for what reason. But it all comes down to the bottom line.
Well, it does come down to the bottom line. And from every one of our discussions, we're not making any big promises other than just saying that we know that the human intelligence, to go back to what Dan said, it's the human intelligence plus the artificial intelligence. So it's human plus is how we're actually going to get. And this is all grounded in RWD, which leads to better RWE. So we move down that into that space. So I want to think we're right at time here. But I really appreciate everyone here certainly is advocating for not letting AI just go unnoticed. We're a part of it. So I will conclude and send it back to our host and say thank you to everyone for your great dialogue here.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.